Within days, though, Woodward's book had ignited a media bonfire, and I was the guy being burned at the stake. This controversy was the last thing I needed. I took off for a few days and went up to the New Jersey shore by myself. I wanted to get my thoughts together, and the beach, to me, is about the most serene place on earth. This, however, was not a peaceful time. Yes, we at CIA had been wrong in believing that Saddam had weapons of mass destruction. In the National Intelligence Estimate, in testimony on the Hill, in briefings to almost every member of Congress, I, John McLaughlin, and others had delivered the same message. Our analysis showed that Iraq had chemical and biological weapons and was working on a nuclear capability, though they were years away from achieving it. There was no secret about it. Now, thanks to White House spin, our long, complex record on a difficult subject had been reduced to some ridiculous scene out of a comic opera. It was like I was Tom Cruise jumping on Oprah Winfrey's couch. It was obvious to me that this whole Oval Office arm-waving, jumping off the sofa, slam-dunk scene had been fed deliberately to Woodward to shift the blame from the White House to CIA for what had proved to be a failed rationale for the war in Iraq. Woodward's books, dependent as they are on insider access, have long been used in just this way, to deflect blame and set up fall guys. Now it had happened to me. I remember sitting there at the beach, contemplating all we had accomplished in my 7 years on the hot seat, the rebuilding of a broken agency, the restoration of morale, the successes in Afghanistan, and the larger war on terrorism, the takedown of A.Q. Khan, and the neutralizing of WMD development in Libya, our role in the Middle East peace process, my own role as personal envoy to the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, and Pervez Musharraf, and so much else, and thinking, my God, none of that really matters to this administration. What I couldn't stop wondering was, had the president been convinced by some of his advisers that the blame should be shifted onto me? In the end, I will never know the answer to that question. I like the president, plain and simple. We have been bound together after 9/11 by a national trauma and a common purpose. All of us at the Storms Center believed we were doing the right thing, and every one of us, the president included, had given it his or her absolute best effort. His staff, though, had different priorities. For them, preserving the president's reputation, particularly with an election coming up and a war plan coming apart, was job one. Perhaps I was just collateral damage. Maybe my second day at the shore, I phoned Andy Card at the White House and laid it on the line for him. Andy, I remember saying, I'm calling to tell you that I'm really angry. Yes, we wrote a national intelligence estimate, we expressed our confidence levels, John McLaughlin and I briefed almost every member of Congress. We were fairly strident about the fact that we believed Saddam had weapons of mass destruction. But what you guys have gone and done has made me look stupid, and I just want to tell you how furious I am about it. For someone in the administration to now hang this around my neck is about the most despicable thing I have ever seen in my life. Andy is one of the most honorable, decent people I've ever worked with. What's more, he was always very good to me. But he is also extremely disciplined about what he says when he talks to you, and this time he said nothing in response. It was only quiet from the other end. Yet in that silence, I understood that there had been a fundamental breakdown of trust between the White House and me. In short, it finally, absolutely, was time to go. I couldn't quit immediately over something that had appeared in a book, but I didn't see any way I could or should stay on much longer. Over the next 6 weeks, I tried to think through the resignation process with Stephanie, my brother Bill, John McLaughlin, John Mosman, and Bill Harlow. I also talked to David Bourne about it in this period, as well as to my old friend Ken Levitt, who went back years with me in the Senate and had served as my special counsel at CIA. That Memorial Day weekend, back at the beach, I had several long conversations with my brother. He was adamantly against resignation, because he felt that if I stepped down, the administration would dump on me whatever else they wanted to. They've already done that, I pointed out to him, and I'm still in the job. Stephanie was also opposed to my resignation because she did not want me to leave while the country was at war and our men and women were at risk on the ground in Afghanistan and Iraq. As for me, I already knew the answer. Unfortunately, to the outside world, my credibility had been undermined. My staying on would only hurt CIA. And then, as if by magic, someone appeared to confirm my decision to go. That Sunday evening, we were cooking hamburgers, but we didn't have any buns. I volunteered to run over to the A&P to get them. I've always found food stores and food shopping to be very therapeutic, probably as a function of growing up in my family's diner. So there I was at the A&P, pushing my cart down aisle 7, and unbeknownst to me, Louis Free, a dear friend who 3 years earlier had stepped down as FBI director and was a fellow devotee of the Jersey Shore, was simultaneously pushing his cart down aisle 8. At the end of the aisle, Louis made a left turn, I made a right turn, and, yes, it's true, our carts smacked right into each other. I looked up and said, "Well, Louis, how are you?" He said, "Fine," and asked after me, and since we knew each other well and had gone through some of the same battles, I told him how upset I really was. We were both in shorts and T-shirts. My security detail was waiting outside. I explained my thinking, and we discussed my dilemma standing there in the middle of the A&P, our carts blocking the aisle. Louis first tried to talk me out of resigning. I looked at him and said, "I can't stay. Trust has been broken." Louis finally said to me, "You're right. It is time to leave. Now, here's how you do it. To begin with," Louis said, "you pick the date. No one else does." "Fine," I told him. "Thursday, 4 days hence." "Okay, Thursday. You go in to see the president late Wednesday night. You ask to see him alone. You tell him that it is your intention to resign and to issue a public statement the following morning, and you ask him to keep this between the two of you until that occurs. Then once he announces you're leaving, you announce it to your workforce. The key thing is to allow no more than 10 to 12 hours to separate your conversation with the president and your announcement to your own people. That's why you don't see him earlier in the day or in the middle of the day. You see him as late as you can possibly see him because you want to keep this buttoned up. The worst thing that could happen is that word reaches your people before you tell them. You don't want to be in that position." I shook hands with Louis when he was through and went back to the house feeling terrific. "God has spoken," I said when I walked into the house. "Louis has told me how to do it, and that's what I'm going to do." After I explained what that was about, Stephanie felt better about it too, but she wasn't yet convinced this was the right course. As for me, I slept great that night, better than I had slept in months, maybe in years. Before Louis and I parted at the A&P, we had agreed to meet the next morning with our families under the American flag for the terrific local Memorial Day parade. Louis, his wife Marilyn, and Stephanie and I chatted away about the situation. For Stephanie, I know it was an important moment. She got a great deal of comfort from Louis and from the way he reinforced that this was the right thing to do. And by the time we set off that afternoon to drive back to Washington, she had come into camp too. Louis Freeh swore me into office in 1997, and now he was telling me how to quit. Life had come full circle.